Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's wild, balls to the wall action revenge flicks when I put Joseph Sargent's White Lightning against Robert Rodriguez's Desperado. And man, this was a really fun one to get through because both of these movies I really love, and they're definitely a treat to watch again and again. So, and are going to be a hard choice because I love both of these movies, but like I said, this is the 70s versus the 90s, and there has to be a winner at the end. So let's just dive right on in to the nitty and the picky. First up, we have Joseph Sargent's White Lightning. And as the trailer, which is one of the most badass trailers that I've ever seen, states, Burt Reynolds is Gator McCluskey. He's a booze running, motor gunning, law breaking, love making rebel. And that pretty much sums up that character. Basically, we find Gator McCluskey's in prison for moonshine and bootleg and all that stuff. But he finds out that his brother has been killed by a corrupt sheriff played by Ned Beatty, who's absolutely brilliant in this film. This is one of the greatest villains that I've ever seen in a film. And of course, the film, the opening credits is, we see how the sheriff murdered his brother, and that's real fucked up. And so Gator takes it upon himself. He initially tries to just walk out of prison. Of course, that doesn't work. And the brilliant score by Charles Bernstein. And so then he just decides that, well, what if I just go undercover? We all know the sheriff's taking money from moonshine, and the federal government accepts his proposal and now throws him into Bogan County, which is run by Ned Beatty's character, Sheriff J.C. Connors, and he has a contact that's on probation, has been breaking probation. He's supposed to help him out, played by one of the great character actors, Matt Clark. You definitely a very distinct face. Once you know who he is, you never forget him. He's in a lot of shit, and he's brilliant in this too. His name is Dude in the film, Dude Watson, and of course he gets him put on with Bo Hopkins, which is and it's got a Rebel Roy is his name, run blocker and all this stuff, and take names because of course Gator don't give a fuck about taking anybody down other than J.C. Connors, and basically just wants to kill him. He just needed an excuse to get close to the motherfucker. Ends up banging Bo Hopkins' woman, banging a cuck of Bo Hopkins, this woman played by Jennifer Billingsley. And the film itself is, just a badass piece of cinema. You got great car chases, which is to be expected in a good old boy car chase flick. Of course, when you got uh Burt Reynolds' stunt double, Hal Needham, as the second unit director, the action's going to be nothing short of brilliant. Now, this was like the movie that broke Hal Needham for doing stunts and shit. That fucking jump with that car that lands on that barge, fucked him up so bad. He's like, I ain't never doing those stunts again. And that's when he went on to direct, which Hal Needham's directorial debut was the best Burt Reynolds movie about bootlegging, which is Smokey and the Bandit. White Lightning, in my opinion, is the second best movie that Burt Reynolds played about bootlegging. But try to explain to me why the two best Burt Reynolds movies are about bootlegging. But like I said, plenty of car chases, and of course, Ned Beatty is absolutely sinister in this film. And of course, both Beatty and Reynolds were coming off of the hit that was Deliverance. And this is way better than fucking Deliverance. No sodomy and a lot more badassery. And, but, like I said, for as badass as the film is, a lot of great moments, a lot of great lines. R.G. Armstrong is also in it. He's got some phenomenal scenes, especially when he pulls that knife on Burt Reynolds. And Burt Reynolds is cold. It's like, how you like that knife jammed up your ass? I wouldn't like that at all. It's just fucking brilliant. And they're getting him drunk and they're about to beat the shit out of him and stuff, and gets one over on him. Plus, Bo Hopkins is a kind of a bitch in this movie. You kind of feel bad he's getting cucked, but then he just runs like a bitch after they ambush dude, and then they get. Nah, I mean, his woman's there too. You ain't gonna fight for your damn woman. I guess, because she's fucking Burt Reynolds now. But anyways, this movie is badass, but it honestly can't compare to the badassery of what we move on to Robert Rodriguez's Desperado, which was his follow up to his debut film El Mariachi, which is also kind of a sequel, is the second installment of the El Mariachi trilogy. Now, but instead of Carlos Gallardo, we get Antonio Banderas as the character El Mariachi, and of course, this was the movie that made Antonio Banderas an action star. Up until then, he was started out as a regular in Almodovar films, and then for as far as his American output, was playing Tom Hanks's boyfriend in Philadelphia. Here he gets to be a fucking badass. Also, this is the movie that was at kind of Zelma Hayek's American debut, or Hollywood debut, whatever you want to call it, because up until then she was just a regular in like telenovelas. And of course, like, Robert Rodriguez should get like the Nobel Peace Prize for like bringing that goddess to the world, because as you see in the film, she's so fine, she's stopping traffic. But the film is like, that opening is fucking amazing. The movie starts like a bullet and never fucking stops. Where the Steve Buscemi, get telling the bar about what went down, and we see what had, all that shit. Of course, Cheech Marin is the bartender, is fucking badass. And even Quentin Tarantino, who pops up in this film in the middle, with that whole joke and everything, just absolutely perfect. This movie is badass, sexy, some of the greatest action sequences ever. That fucking bar shootout in the middle of the film is pure poetry. It's like a ballet of bullets. It's fucking beautiful. It's a basic revenge flick, because it kind of picks up where El Mariachi left off, where now he's searching for the man at the top, who fucking did it, is responsible for the motherfuckers that killed the woman he loved. And it's also kind of a heavy thing when he finds out that it's his brother that he's looking for, who's absolutely brilliant. I forget how to pronounce that dude's name, but the guy that plays Bucho is absolutely great. He's just such a fucking asshole, and just his contempt for everything. There's a moment in Desperado where is a perfect comparison to a love scene and a fuck scene, which is something that I heard Tony Scott talk about. There's a very distinct difference between a love scene and a fuck scene. And that love scene, perhaps one of the sexiest scenes I've ever seen in a movie, is when that whole, they start out, Antonio Banderas and Zelma Hayek, teaching her play the guitar, and then they end up fucking, and it's just, we got the music going, and it's fucking beautiful. But then it cuts to Bucho getting rode like a fucking mechanical bull by his woman, and them chaps get the ass all out, and then he just fucking takes a hit off of his cigar and then blows it back in her mouth. That's a fuck scene. It's sexy. It starts out sexy, but then it gets crude, But movie has got this phenomenal stunts, like when they burn down the bookstore and then he fucking jumps off that motherfucker backwards and stuff. And then of course the ending shootout when you get the OG El Mariachi to pop up on his flank. He got a fucking rocket launcher and in the guitar case. Is fucking insanity that only Robert Rodriguez can bring. The only other motherfucker that's on Rodriguez's level is John Woo. Of course, John Woo came before Rodriguez, just finished what John Woo started. And in a way, Rodriguez is kind of like John Carpenter meets John Woo in that regard, and just pure brilliance that only this motherfucker can provide. Like I said, he made Antonio Banderas an action star and gave the world Zelma Hayek. What more can you ask for a filmmaker? And especially, in my opinion, this is his greatest film. There's nothing. I don't think he's topped Desperado. He's come damn close. But this is just pure fucking brilliance. Like I said, the greatest action movie if Hard Boiled didn't exist. So, for anybody keeping score, that is 98 to 82 because I got to give this round to Desperado. Whereas, like, it's a hard decision, but then again, it's not a hard decision because, I mean, for as great as White Lightning is, it does kind of take a minute to get going. It's definitely a really good build up and it's a hell of a payoff. But Desperado starts and it never fucking lets up. The music might even be better too. Thing about it is Joseph Sargent, very mid director. White Lightning is really his only good movie. What else this motherfucker got? MacArthur, Jaws the Revenge. He's got some other decent ones, but nothing got better than White Lightning. Rodriguez, one of the greatest action directors of all time. This man makes just pure badassery. And, where he may not have made a better film than Desperado, he had plenty that were on par. And of course, one, Desperado's way sexier. Characters are more badass. A lot of times there's a lot of the discrepancies in White Lightning. Desperado is solid as a fucking rock. No doubt about it. And of course, the action is way better. Now, granted, there are no car chases in Desperado. That's one thing White Lightning's got on it. But shootouts, White Lightning can't hold a flickering birthday candle to it. Now, this one, bit of a bullshit round. But I couldn't really think of anything better to put against Desperado as far as his balls to the wall action revenge flicks. Because that's what both of these movies are at their core. Badass action revenge flicks. The only difference is one's a good old boy car chase flick, the other one's a Mexican action film. Who really gives a fuck? Action is action. So, like I said, for anybody keeping score, that is 98 to 82. 70s are only up by 16 now. Thing about it is, man, 90s action films really kick the 70s ass, especially with gems like this. I mean, fuck. You think about what Columbia TriStar was putting out in the 90s, fucking Desperado, Leon the Professional, among other fucking things. Just endless fucking greatness. So, my money's still on the 70s, but I mean, them 90s keep coming back with them 1-2 punches. Actually, could be the beginning of a streak. There's 2 in a row right now with Cheech Marin, I might add. There's the previous one, Caddyshack versus Tin Cup. And you can't really go wrong with a bad motherfucker like that. So, if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. I really don't give a fuck. There's just one asshole's opinion on a very long, self-indulgent journey to see which decade was better for movies, the 70s or the 90s. Just don't be surprised if I reply back or in very length, because like I said, I have no life. That is why I keep doing these fucking matchups. So just keep it badass, because life's too short to be anything short of a badass.